Hi, friends. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you for joining me live today. It's Thursday night, 8 p.m., and this is when I come on live and I share something that I've been writing, chat a little bit about the process. And this week, St. Patrick's Day, this day, I am going to share something that is very near and dear to me. This this personal essay, I've actually been up until 1 in the morning for the last 3 nights working on this, so I am absolutely exhausted right now. And as soon as this is done, I'm going straight to bed. Um, so bear with me here because I'm past exhaustion. The essay that I'm going to read for you is called Erin Brach, How My Irish Heritage Found Me. And the first thing I just want to say right off the bat is that I love my Irish heritage. I love it. But this part of my identity also stirs up some complex feelings for me. And so in this personal essay, I really dive deep into my personal experiences growing up, as well as my family's history, their immigration to the United States, and also my goals for introducing our Irish heritage to my kids. So, with that being said, I am going to get started. Um, for those of you on Facebook, the link to the full article is in the description of this video. And for those of you on Instagram, it's on the featured page, lifebeyondparenting.com. All right, my friends. Oh, and for those of you who stick around for the end, I've got just a pretty cool thing about the writing process that I'm excited to share with you guys. So, all right, here we go. Erin Brach, How My Irish Heritage Found Me. We are Irish, my father proclaimed throughout my life, desperate to preserve our Irish heritage. Never mind my mother's Italian roots. The lone pieces of Irish decor strategically placed throughout my childhood home attested to his devotion. All coffee and side tables elevated a piece of bleak pottery, an unused ashtray, a flowerless vase dotted with shamrocks, a shallow bowl so thin I feared I would shatter it if I ran into the room and leapt on the sofa. Despite my father's continuous home improvement projects, he never moved the large oil painting of early Ireland from its focal point above his oak desk. His bedroom and the family room displayed stone-carved Celtic crosses that must have required heavy-duty screws to hold them up. And the Our Lady of Knock and St. Patrick statues smiled upon the guests we entertained in the living room. Outside, the Irish flag waved at passers-by from our front lawn. Occasionally, my dad filled our house with his friends. Most were either of Irish descent or directly from the motherland. As I lay on the floor with my head in my hands, I'd listen to my father, a master oral storyteller, recount his own adventures across the pond and the stories of his grandparents that they had shared about their lives in Ireland. In those moments, I could smell the sheep, feel the emerald grass brushing against my fingertips, and imagine the taste of warm bread shared among friends. In the background, the chieftains and the Irish rovers played the bagpipes and fiddle. Some guests would join the chorus, clanging my mom's spoons against their knees while my father played the bodhrán, an Irish drum covered on one side with goatskin. When the spirit or the Guinness moved them, my father dragged the coffee table aside. The adults formed two facing lines, and together they danced the jig. The air smelt of pipe smoke and whiskey, and I watched from the lap of a grown-up admiring my curls. Surprisingly, I never considered those events or people distinctly Irish. Those parties were simply how we spent time with friends. When my father and his guests spoke Irish, they weren't speaking a foreign language. Even though I did not know the meanings of their words, the sounds of the Irish spoken aloud comforted me as much as any childhood lullaby. On the other hand, we celebrated St. Patrick's Day like a holy day of obligation. That included mandatory attendance at the local parade, from early preparation to final demolition. While my father ran back and forth, engaging almost everyone in conversation and organizing and arranging God knows what, my brother and I tried to entertain ourselves by playing tag or Game Boy while mom played referee. During the parade, he hardly ever glanced our way as he marched past, the tassels on his sporran bouncing with each step. I never knew if he just didn't see us jumping up and down, screaming his name, or if he had disappeared into the rhythm of the bagpipes and dreamt he was visiting Ireland once more. After the crowds thinned, I slumped down on the curb, peeling confetti off the bottom of my shoes, while I waited for my dad's storytelling and the packing to conclude. I even tried to nap on the sidewalk once. To commemorate the official holiday, we always went out to dinner, Dad dressed in full kilt, of course. Because my brother and I were so young, we weren't dining at pubs, but rather at family-friendly American chain restaurants. And in the 80s and 90s, seeing someone wearing a kilt outside of a parade or festival grounds garnered stares. As my father marched down the aisle to our table, his chest puffed forward and head held high, I studied my mother's shoes. The servers usually asked my dad questions, complimented his clothing, and reluctantly made their other customers wait as my dad imparted at least one Irish culture-related lesson. He suddenly had an Irish accent, too. I just focused on my chicken fingers and french fries and tried not to be too loud, which would only result in him shushing me because I'd embarrassed him. Being a stubborn child, I resisted my father's zealous teachings. When I begged my parents to sign me up for gymnastics in elementary school, surely the bullying would stop if I was a gymnast too. My father stipulated I would have to learn Irish step dancing as well. My mom took me to an in-session class. As I clung to her arm, I observed a sterile room large enough to swallow me whole, groups of kids chatting in established groups, and then kids moving their feet in complicated patterns that I couldn't imagine mimicking. When I told my dad I didn't want to learn step dancing, he refused to alter his conditions and left no room for discussion. Thus, I experienced neither. A double defeat I didn't realize until years later. As such, my father's fanaticism engendered mostly resentment and distance. The more he insisted I was Irish, the more I insisted I was Italian, even though my maternal grandparents did little to teach their children about their heritage. Like most immigrants of the time, they wanted my mom and her siblings to grow up American, so they refrained from speaking Italian. Aside from the shape of my hands, our family recipes, and the random Italian words my late grandma used among relatives, I lost the foundation of my bridge to Italy when I lost my grandparents. Conversely, my second-generation Irish-American father can still relate almost any person, place, or thing back to Ireland. When I first discovered reading could be fun, my father recommended Joyce Carol Oates, whose work, I'm so sorry, isn't known to be fun. When we planned our first long-awaited family vacation to Florida, my father kept mentioning Ireland's palm trees in the South. When my brother wanted to play baseball, my father bought him hurling sticks. And while other families spent afternoons tossing around a football, my father practiced playing the bagpipes and marching circles around our backyard. Although my brother and I could not understand our father's desperate need to preserve this portion of his identity, we both eagerly anticipated one particular Irish-based holiday: Halloween. Without fail, my dad transformed himself into Lord Samhain, Lord of the Underworld. His black robe and billowy cloak accentuated his lifelike crimson mask, its hollow cheeks and elongated chin. He glued onto his nails talons painted black, which he wrapped around a gnarled walking stick. At the top of the staff, my dad had attached a realistic human skull and the eye sockets illuminated with a glow stick. As he escorted me and my brother from house to house, my father's long strides, cold demeanor, and slow, deliberate movements made most other adults flinch and their kids scramble closer to their parents. My brother and I found this very cool. After we chanted, "Trick or treat," and plunged our hands into the candy bowl, our benefactors would cautiously ask us, "Do you know that man?" Proudly I'd reply, "That's my dad." Other less forced moments drew my attention too. When assigned to dusting duty, I always paused to watch the ceramic maiden in her white bonnet and green skirt rotate to the sweet melody of When Irish Eyes Are Smiling. Still got her. At night, I nestled in the crook of my arm Deirdre, a porcelain doll with 2 long braids and a straw hat that my father brought back from Ireland. As I grew older, we also attended our hometown's annual Irish Fesh and other local Celtic festivals. I gravitated toward the jewelry, subconsciously tracing the intricate knots that preserve an ancient art. My stomach directed me to the stalls selling bangers and mash, fish and chips, and bread pudding. I sat for hours under the main tent, admiring the step dancers bouncing across the stage. As they kicked their legs high in the air, my feet tapped to the rhythm of the music. My entire lower half ached to dance too. When we saw the dancers roaming the fesh, I stared at the Swarovski crystal decorating their vibrant velvet dresses and matching tiaras. My mother marveled at the dancers' doll-like ringlets and often remarked, "And to think, your hair is naturally that curly." By the time I entered my early 20s, I wanted to learn more about my heritage, but I hesitated asking my father, who so arduously tried to make me Irish. One day, while browsing the new fiction section at Borders, I stumbled upon The Princes of Ireland by Edward Rutherford. Although an Englishman, God forbid, Rutherford had made Dublin his home for more than 13 years and had consulted many historians to ensure his characters were placed in scrupulously accurate settings and events. In short, I felt like I could trust him. I was right to do so. Rutherford's novel added depth and texture to the images my father had first created. I visited the monks at Glendalough, leafed through the illuminated pages of the books of Kells, and witnessed Brian Boru's death at the Battle of Clontarf. Moreover, through Rutherford's fictional characters, I experienced what my ancestors lived through: the coming of St. Patrick, the Viking longships lowering anchor, and the trickery of Kings Henry II and VIII. I was astounded to recognize characteristic traits that I myself possessed, namely a vivid spirit, an affinity for nature — I used to read children's books to trees and flowers — and the occasional stubborn streak that sows discord between me and my father. By relating to and understanding the past, I grew more sympathetic to the Catholic and Protestant conflict that tore my family apart and led to my great-grandparents' immigration. My family hails from Derry in Northern Ireland. As my father told me, half the Cannings converted to Protestantism in order to keep their land. In the process, our Roman Catholic family deemed them traitors. I've seen this resentment still divide my family today. Whenever chance allowed us to meet another Canning at a fesh in the United States, that distant relative inevitably asked which side of the family my father and I were descended from. When we met an Irish-born Canning exhibiting a few books he authored, another family trait I inherited, he smiled when he saw my father's Celtic cross dangling around his neck, advertising our Catholicism. "Oh, you're from my side of the family," he said gaily. But my family's history is more complicated than that. Here's a love story for you. Have you heard the folk song, The Orange and the Green? My grandfather loved that one most of all because it reminded him of his parents. You see, my Protestant, Orange, great-grandfather, Robert Canning, fell in love with Catherine Boynton, a Catholic, green lady. Despite the objections of their families, they married and immigrated to the United States. As much as I loved Rutherford's book, I remember Robert and Catherine's stories better. Stories my father told, such as how Sundays split the family apart. While Catherine brought the children to a Catholic church, Robert attended a Protestant mass alone. Then one night, my great-granddad didn't show up for dinner. Catherine and the children waited. The hours ticked by. The children ate their dinner cold, but still no one knew where Robert had gone. At last the door creaked open. In stepped Robert, and Catherine fell to the ground. For in his hands he held rosary beads. He had secretly been attending catechism classes so he could convert back to Catholicism. Finally, the whole family attended Mass together. At least they did for a few weeks until my great-granddad suddenly passed away. As much as they loved each other, their immigration created an indelible wound that passed down through the generations. As they shared their love for Ireland, they also shared their pain. My dad heard many stories about the Great Hunger, which the rest of the world calls the Irish Potato Famine, about our divided family constantly fighting each other, about the banning of the Irish language and kilt, and about the cold welcome the Irish received when escaping starvation and persecution. No Irish need apply. I can see now why my father clings to the memories and lessons his grandparents imparted, and how they compel him to participate in preserving a culture and language that were nearly eradicated. I never asked my father, but I also suspect his devotion to everything Irish also serves to preserve the memory of his own father, whom my dad lost to cancer at just 19 years old. The insight and knowledge I've gained with age further complicate my relationship with my Irish heritage, especially as I struggle to separate that portion of my identity from the father who disowned me only a few years ago. Knowing that the intergenerational effects of trauma could have contributed to my father's carefully concealed anger, immutable perspective, emotional detachment, and overall narcissism doesn't negate my personal experiences. The nostalgia and affection I feel for all things Celtic are forever knotted together with the trauma my father inflicted throughout my life. Trauma I'm still not able to write about in detail. My interactions with my dad's Irish friends exemplify this complex knot. For example, as a longtime member of the Ancient Order of the Hibernians, an Irish and Irish American organization, my father saved the best version of himself for his AOH brothers. I still remember my dad standing in the middle of our driveway, chatting and laughing with his friends, patting them on the back, offering advice and encouragement, entertaining them with jokes, and enchanting them with the same stories I cherished from afar. But the moment they left and my dad came inside, he reverted to barking at my mom, my brother, and me. Every day he sequestered himself in the family room where our family rarely gathered. And then we attended the AOH family-wide events or Celtic festivals, and one person after another would holler and wave my father over to join them. Soon enough, he'd leave me behind, and each of his friends would take turns gushing to me about my dad's humor, all the times he'd treated them to dinner and invaluable advice, all the ways in which he'd become a surrogate dad to them. They'd envy my luck to have been blessed with such a supportive, engaging father. Eventually, I numbed myself to imagining their version of a parent I never had. I also discovered that I couldn't resent his Irish friends because, first, they didn't beget my dad's behavior toward his own family, and second, gosh darn it, I love them all too. It's impossible to not get swept away when surrounded by such a jolly fellowship. I associate grabbing a pint, listening to pub music, and clapping my hands every time there's whiskey in the jar with pure jubilation. The Irish spirit is endearing and inspiring and irresistible. I just wished I could have experienced that jubilation with my dad rather than from behind him. Although I cannot change my past, I try now to share with my children the aspects of Irish culture I hold most dear. Thanks to my husband, our kids are an amalgamation of genetics. They even have a bit of English heritage in them too. Look at what several generations of progression can breed. During the month of March, our house vibrates to the sounds of bagpipes, fiddles, and bodhráns. We listen to traditional music and then have family dance-offs to Gaelic Storm. When we took our then 4-year-old son to the Maryland Renaissance Fair, my husband and described our favorite local Irish band, Dublin 5, performing live. Our son ran down the aisle to the front of the stage and began dancing in circles. At the end of their performance, the fiddler, Jen Bell, invited my son onto the stage. She knelt down behind him, propped her fiddle against his chest, and guided his hand as he glided the bow back and forth to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. My little boy kept looking up at me, a smile wider and brighter than the crescent moon, and shaking his head in wonder that he could play the fiddle too. Her kindness created such a tender moment that left my sweet boy feeling like the luckiest kid in the world. This year, I've been counting the days until this weekend's parade. My son's been counting too, jumping each morning as he realizes the days have been rapidly decreasing. I'm excited to watch them enjoy every moment of the parade. The stage performances, the dancing, and the boardwalk festivities. I wonder if my kids' reactions will match the first time my eldest son watched Irish dancers. He slowly lowered himself to the ground, folded his hands in his lap, and turned into a statue. When the show concluded, he declared, "Mama, that was amazing." No matter what, I'm certain they'll have fun, and when they've had enough, we'll know it's time to head home. In the meantime, my son pointed out just this week that our house severely lacks St. Patrick's Day decor. I suppose I don't associate decorations with St. Patrick's Day because my childhood house displayed Irish culture all year long, except for leprechauns. My dad banned them. Even though this fairy originates from Irish lore, I think my father loathes the caricature that dehumanized early Irish immigrants. However, my kids love the idea of leprechauns, and I've read a few books involving them, such as The Littlest Leprechaun, which shows children that everyone, no matter how small, is important. Even though I can still picture my father's visceral hatred for leprechauns, maybe it's time I welcome one or two sweet little fellas into our home. As my children grow, I will also share the stories of Ireland and our family's history, because learning about my heritage has rooted me in time, connecting me to the past and influencing my future. And the more I learn about the country and the people my great-grandparents sailed away from, the more I feel damn proud of my family's endurance. Likewise, more than once have I heard my father's lessons escape my mouth. The Irish potato famine wasn't a famine. A famine implies there was no food, but Ireland grew plenty of other crops, but laws required that most of it be exported to Great Britain. In fact, exportation increased while the Irish starved to death. Thus, most Irish call this the Great Hunger. Corned beef and cabbage is Irish American, so don't go looking for it when you're in Ireland, although I do believe that they serve it now for tourists. Irish is its own separate language. It's a branch of Gaelic, but it's not the same as Scottish Gaelic, nor is Irish, just English spoken with a funny accent. A proper Irish coffee, the thick cream sits on top. You only mix the two together with every sip. The English actually outrank the Irish in terms of drinking. Most Irish are brunettes, not redheads. I should actually look up that last one for statistics. The other ones I actually did verify. Anyway, while I don't know if my father will ever value our relationship enough to want to work toward reconciliation, I hope he knows his efforts to preserve our heritage weren't in vain. Despite rolling my eyes from the backseat of our car during yet another lecture, I still paid attention. I absorbed his knowledge, his passion. And someday I'll have my own adventures to share with my kids and grandkids. Although I've traveled as far as Japan and visited England and Italy twice, I have yet to visit Ireland. But I hear her calling. No matter where I go, she always finds me. And when I listen to the bagpipes and fiddle, I am drowned in nostalgia for a culture that my father helped keep alive. that I will help keep alive. After all, Ireland has been a part of me since birth. My namesake, Erin, is the poetic form of Era, Ireland's name in her own language. No wonder she keeps calling me home. There you have it, folks. Taking a deep breath there. That was a bit emotional at moments. So again, thank you for sticking with me through that. I love seeing your little live faces popping on and letting me know that you guys are watching. That's very encouraging. Thank you. The special little thing that I wanted to share at the end in terms of writing this piece, aside from the fact that I was up until 1:30 a.m. for the last 3 nights in a row, I wrote this essay, the initial version of it 9 years ago, back in 2013, if I did my math correctly. And it was not nearly this long. It was about half the length. And I'm so glad that I found it. I always wanted to try to publish it and do something with it, and it never worked. And I remember submitting it to college, or like even for like writing workshops, and people just kind of being like, I don't know, it's lacking something. It's lacking something. Here's what I want to share with you. Just an example of how I see how much our writing progresses with time. Did I just close the window that I need to do this? Because that would really stink. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, okay, there we go. So here is the very first paragraph. I'm probably just going to do the first paragraph. Okay. The essay as it reads now, the first paragraph is this. We are Irish, my father proclaimed throughout my life, desperate to preserve our Irish heritage. Never mind my mother's Italian roots. The original essay started with, throughout our childhood, my father took every opportunity to remind my older brother and me that we were Irish. From early on, we perfected the art of rolling our eyes. I actually changed that because it's setting up right from the beginning that we perfected the rolling of our eyes. Like, it just feels like this entire piece is going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't stand this. And that really isn't what the piece is about. It's actually more about this inner conflict. And so that's why I changed this one. But this is the biggest change that I'm just excited to share with you guys as a little bit of an FYI. Here's the original paragraph that comes right after that. My father, who believes in continuous home improvement, redecorated the family room more than a few times, rearranging the furniture, changing the color scheme from practical tan to royal blue, replacing the wooden bookcase with a marble hutch, yet the large oil painting of early Ireland never moved from its focal point above his hefty oak desk. Within that room, and strategically placed throughout the rest of the home, various pieces of bleak pottery, an unused ashtray, a flowerless vase, an impractical bowl, along with Celtic crosses and Our Lady of Knock statue, caught visitors' eyes at just the right moment. When I went back and read this one, I was like, oh, I can see exactly what my teachers were talking about, that there's stuff missing in here. So I'm just going to break this down a little bit, and then I'm going to call it a night because I'm exhausted. So again, looking at that first sentence, I go on about my father redecorating the family room, about changing the color scheme, about replacing a wooden bookcase with a marble hutch, rearranging furniture. What does this have to do with my Irish heritage? I'm just describing his home improvement projects. like who cares? But the sentence that I really liked in it was, yet the large oil painting of early Ireland never moved from its focal point above his hefty oak desk. I was like, yes, that's what's important. That right there. Then the next sentence, within that room and strategically placed throughout the rest of the house. Okay, strategically placed throughout the rest of the house. What does that mean? Like, can you visualize that? I couldn't visualize that. Various pieces of bleak pottery, an unused ashtray. Okay, a flowerless vase. Could be anything, but okay. An impractical bowl. What makes an impractical bowl? Can you visualize what an impractical bowl is? I had to sit there and be like, what was the impractical bowl? I had to think about that. Along with Celtic crosses. Okay. And an Our Lady of Knock statue. Okay. Caught visitors' eyes at just the right moment. What's just the right moment? Like, depending on your height? What's I couldn't, right. Okay. So here's the redone or the new version of that paragraph. The lone pieces of Irish decor strategically placed throughout my childhood home attested to his devotion. All coffee and side tables elevated a piece of bleak pottery, an unused ashtray, a flowerless vase dotted with shamrocks, a shallow bowl so thin I feared I would shatter it if I ran into the room and leapt on the sofa. That's what made it impractical. It was so crazy thin. Like, it was made of paper. Despite my father's continuous home improvement projects, he never moved the large oil painting of early Ireland from its focal point above his oak desk. His bedroom and the family room displayed stone carved Celtic crosses that must have required heavy duty screws to hold them up. Before I just said Celtic crosses, like I remember in his bedroom, like above the door, just it looked so heavy that it could fall down and man, that would hurt. Be in the hospital. Um, and the Our Lady of Knock and St. Patrick's statues smiled upon the guests we entertained in the living room. That's what I meant by caught visitors' eyes at just the right moment. It was more the fact that they were like when you would walk into the room and they would be smiling down on the guests. Anyway, so there you go, folks. All I wanted to do was show you how it's people always say, I'm so afraid of writing crap. And I'm sure there's very friendly, kind people out there who are going to say, no, your original version wasn't crap. And thank you. Like that was the 20th version of that from 9 years ago. And then I tabled it for 9 years. Right. And the point is that I would not have created the personal essay that I have published today that means so much to me if I hadn't started with a crappy first draft and kept working at it. So that's the lesson I want you to know, that it's okay to write crap because you can table it and then you have something to work from that you can dig deeper into and create something that you can become really proud of and that means something a lot to you, and share your story and your experiences with other people and connect with them and have that camaraderie and help them to feel that they're not so alone, that there's other people who have experienced similar feelings and situations. So I hope you found this essay entertaining. Forgive me as I'm closing windows. Again, thank you so much for watching this, for leaving comments, for sharing it with people that you know who may like hearing this. I love doing these readings live, and as you could see, this piece is near and dear to my heart. So thank you again, and happy St. Patrick's Day, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. And I am off to bed. Good night, friends.